In 2022, a pair of former ball players and a talented young broadcaster were tasked with creating a college football podcast. These men promptly escaped into the mountains of West Virginia and got to work. If you want top-level football analysis, off-topic stories, and locker room humor, you're in the right place. You are In the Gun.
In the Gun, episode number 72. It's time to take a look at the WVU football schedule for this upcoming season, as we are just a week out. We're a week away from being a week away here, waiting on the Mountaineers. So we're going to do a little ceiling, best case scenario, what we think for this season, maybe a floor if things go south, what that could look like as well, too. Plenty to get into. As always, it is In the Gun. I'm Wesley Euler with the best teammates in the business, the signal caller Jed Drenning, and the runaway beer truck Owen Schmidt. And as always, this episode of ITG brought to you in part by our friends at Bet Online, your number one source for all of your betting needs. You can get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right on your phone. So head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to get in on the action. Make sure you use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV at where the game starts. Bet Online. Gentlemen, schedule episode here. So Jed and I were kicking this around before we started recording. Figured it would be a nice way to get us going here. Two rivals, right? And I know as soon as I say this, there's going to be some people who are saying, we haven't played Penn State in 30 years, and look at the all-time series record. That's not a rivalry. Okay, loose term, whatever, all right? Two rivals on the schedule in the first three games to start the season. Of course, that big trip out to Happy Valley, about 10 or 11 days from now, and then 2 weeks later, welcoming those stinking Pitt Panthers to Morgantown for the first time since 2011. So, simple question, and Big O, I'll start with you on this one, since Jed and I kind of kicked it around with, when we hopped on the Zoom call here. If you could only pick one, if we're telling you right now WVU starts 2-1, and we're assuming a victory against Duquesne there in between, who would you rather beat? Penn State in the season opening, top 10 opponent on the road, or Pitt, our most hated rival in the backyard brawl in Morgantown for the first time in over a decade?
Wes, this is an easy one, man. Pitt. Pitt, man.
Owen, that was about the length of my answer when Jed asked me to.
Now, let's give credit where credit's due. I'm still not certain where this poll came from. Someone had told me, we tried to track it down to give proper credit. Somebody told me Greg had mentioned it, so maybe it was a Metro News poll, Greg Hunter. I tried to check Tony's feed. I didn't see it. It might have come from Metro News, but either way, it's a great poll. It's a great content, right? Something to chew on. And I think you can make an entertaining argument. And Skyler, when we mentioned it, said, hey, last year would have been fun too. Last year, would you have picked Pitt or Virginia Tech?
Yeah.
And last year, again, I learned all on my own to hate Virginia Tech. I was taught at an early age to hate Pitt. My whole life I learned. But last year, because the series was going away, I might have picked Tech. But this year, again, your knee-jerk gut reaction is, of course, Pitt, anytime Pitt. Okay, to do that, let's set the what's at stake here. Let's establish the terms. You're turning down an opportunity. This is how much beating Pitt means to us. You're turning down an opportunity for the biggest upset in the history of the West Virginia football program. We've never gone on the road and beaten a team ranked as high as number 7, which Penn State is in the Associated Press. So if you choose Pitt, you're choosing, no, don't want the biggest upset in the history of the program. We want Pitt. And that's why it makes perfect sense for me to entertain it. But it's tough to talk yourself into it. I just think that if you're looking big, long term, and you made a good point too, Wes. I want you to jump in on what you said about this.
Yep.
I think it says more about your football team. You can beat Pitt again, Pitt's getting votes. They're in the preseason poll. They're not in the top 25. They're getting votes. So they might, if a couple breaks go their way and they win decisively enough in their first couple and beat Cincinnati in week 2, convincing. It's going to take some breaks, but they might come to town ranked. Maybe. I think it's
22nd, 23rd, something like that.
It's a long shot, maybe, but they need some help. But you might beat them on a fluke play like they beat us last year. In other words, that was kind of fool's gold. There's no fool's gold going in front of 110,000 top 10 Penn State team with everything back. If you beat them, you're built to win some football games in 2023. If you beat that Penn State team, irrespective of what happens or doesn't happen, you know you're built to win some games, okay? There's no guarantee of that with Pitt. If I'm throwing some shade at Pitt, that's by design, right? But, boy, I might, all that being said, because of what happened last year, still say we got to get one on the Panthers. We got to get one on the Panthers. And think about what Owen said. Owen, I want you to chime in too. I'll never forget you telling me this. After the game we dare not speak of in 2007, I watched the game and you played lights out. You played incredible football that night. And I asked you, I said, was it because you had a national championship berth on the line? You said, no. Was it because it was Pitt? You said, nope. And this is all you need to know about Owen Schmidt. You remember what he said, Wes?
Yeah, it was his last game at Mountaineer Field.
It was my last game on Mountaineer Field. So, Owen, what do you got to say?
I mean, dude, as far as the 07 game, I mean, still true to this day. Unfortunately, my last showing at Mountaineer Field is known as one of the worst losses in history. But this year, I understand beating Penn State would be tremendous for us starting out the season, but we can still play close and lose and still have high hopes for this season. Pitt is just one that, buddy, it's the backyard brawl. It's the neighbor. It's the stepbrother you don't like.
Those things.
You know what I mean?
That's it.
You know what I mean? It's just what it is. We want it bad, and it's at home. It's our first real night game in Morgantown in a very long time. The game sold out in an hour or whatever the media is saying.
10 minutes, yeah.
It's going to be an electrifying atmosphere. And regardless if we took a bad beat at Penn State, beating the dog crap out of Pitt would bring us right back on top as far as the energy level goes into the season, in my opinion.
And Jed, I think too, the big kicker, one more thing, and then I'll get into kind of what my final point was too, is what Owen just said, the Pitt game at home. And I know we would have never scheduled it to play Penn State and Pitt both out of conference, both on the road in the same season. That would just make no sense. But if that were the case, if the game was up in Pittsburgh again, I might even think about it a little bit longer. But yeah, those guys haven't won on our turf since that game that we do not talk about. And I'd like to keep that streak going. I can't have those guys waltzing in a night game in prime time and beating us for the second straight year. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, WVU hasn't beat us since 2011. Oh, that's been so long, hasn't it? I can't do it. I'm obviously biased in this, right? Because if you were somebody who lives outside of Blacksburg, you probably would say that you hate Virginia Tech more than Pitt because you bump shoulders, you rub elbows with their fans all the time and they drive you crazy. That's obviously me being born and raised here. I live 25 minutes away from Pitt's campus. I work for the Steelers and I bump shoulders with a lot of those people. You've all heard the famous Pat Narduzzi hat story, right? I hear or see or something about Pitt almost every single day of my life. They're like, the gum on your shoe that you can't get rid of, and you hear it squeaking every time you take a step. My last point, though, for every reason that we've said of the answer being Pitt, is I feel like we compete more with Pitt as a program. And that probably makes sense to most of you. But what I mean is, Penn State is like, they're a step above us. And I think they're a step above Pitt as well, too. They're not Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia, but I do think they're in that second tier with some of those other programs, and I think whereas us and Pitt, very similar type of tiers of college football programs where we're recruiting against Pitt a lot more than we are against Penn State. We're competing for coaching staffs and administrators and recruits and all this stuff with Pitt much more than we are Penn State. And so while you're right, the opening game, top 10 win on the road in an atmosphere like that would be amazing for the program. But I think long term, or just for the next 365 days, for our coaching staff, for everybody involved with the athletic department to be able to say, hey, you know, we beat those guys, those Pitt guys this year. And, you know, they're coming off the end of their glory days. Kenny Pickett's long gone. They've had all these draft picks. They're, you know, they had their moment. It's our moment now to ascend. They're on the decline. We're on the climb, right? I think you could preach all that messaging for a year with a win over Pitt. I don't know if you're doing the same with Penn State.
So, question before we jump into our best and worst case scenarios for West Virginia 2023. I'm not sure the answer. I wonder if we play, you mentioned Narduzzi, and I think of this every time you mention his name. Are we able to play? Will YouTube shoot us down for copyright infringement if we play our Pat Narduzzi theme song on here? You guys know what I'm talking about because I text it to you constantly. Anybody that's seen superhero movie,
D bag of the year award.
Yes. So we better avoid it right now. But for hats off, no pun intended, Wes, to Pat Narduzzi, the D-bag of the year. So let's get rolling with our best and worst, because I think Big O has a Greenbrier West football emergency tonight.
Yes, I know. Big O has to get himself to practice here soon. So, all right, Big O. Give me your ceiling and your floor for WVU, right? Okay, best case scenario, I think we could do this. I think this could be our record. I think we could find ourselves here. Worst case scenario, quarterback play doesn't develop like we want it to. Offensive line isn't one of the best units. You know, defense struggles. If things kind of get unraveled, here's what I think the worst case scenario could be. How you feeling?
Whatever order you want. Yeah.
I'm going to say best case scenario for us. What, 8-2,
4,
8-4,
8-4, yeah, 8-4, huh?
Look, he's already dialed into Greenbrier West. See,
he's already dialed.
Yeah, he's thinking Greenbrier West can be 8-2. Yeah,
yeah, 12 game regular season.
High school schedule here. Yeah, I'm thinking like 8-4, and I'm thinking worst case scenario. Probably the reverse of that, 4-8.
Oh. What do you think would be the why behind either? In other words,
I'd say I'd say the reason we'd do well is because we are able to control the clock with the run game. And I think quarterback play would steadily improve as the season went on. We lose a couple close ones. It could be 10-2. Best case scenario. But really, I think 8-4 realistically, if I'm being super realistic. And I'd say probably because the run game got on board and our secondary play improved tremendously from last year. Now, why it didn't go well, basically the opposite. Run game just couldn't get started. Maybe we have like a bunch of injuries. Quarterback play is just wishy-washy. Both guys just can't get in a rhythm. We just can't get anything going. Possible play call. Maybe we're too puckered up to take chances this year, which hopefully we shouldn't be, obviously, because we all know this is a make or break year for Neil Brown. So hopefully that isn't the case, but that's kind of where I could see it going for us if things don't play out as well.
So I'm pretty similar from Owen. I'm not far off. I'll go with the same worst case scenario. 4-8, I think, is worst case scenario. I'll go one game better for best case scenario, though, 9-3. Let's start with the good here. This schedule is very difficult. You're one of two programs again in the country that are playing 11 Power 5 opponents. You start on the road against a top 10 opponent. By every metric, I don't care if you're going people who are just going off of eyeball stuff, if you're going people who are digging deep in the analytics, whether it's ESPN, Pro Football Focus, everything in between, every toughest schedule in college football list has WVU somewhere in the top 5. They all do. So I think 9-3. Some people might be thinking, really, that's your guys' best case is 8 wins, 9 wins. The schedule is brutal. I think 9-3 would be very impressive considering the uncertainty at quarterback, some of the uncertainty with the defense, and just how difficult the schedule is in a season like this. 9-3, though, hey, you start 2-1, like we talked about, right? I mean, the dream scenario is to start 3-0, and then you're really cooking. But say you start 2-1, you get Texas Tech at home as well, too. 3-1, maybe you go down there to TCU, and they're not quite what they were last year, and you're able to knock them off. You get back-to-back wins in Texas. All of a sudden, you're 5-1. You got some tougher games down the stretch there as well, too. But even if you're 4-2 halfway through the season, you could still on that back end. Oklahoma State's going to struggle. UCF and BYU, both new to the conference. Oklahoma, to me, is kind of the biggest question mark this year. I could see them winning 10 games. I could see them being 6-6 again. Cincinnati, brand new coaching staff, brand new offense, new era for them. And then Baylor to close out the season, which always seems like it's a coin flip game every time we play Baylor, right? Something crazy happens. Either one of us blows each other out, or it's like a game like last year that comes down to the wire. So 9-3 for me, best case scenario. Garrett Green, Nico, whoever the quarterback situation is decided by the Duquesne game. You're off and running. The defense surprises us all. The offensive line is one of the best units in the Big 12, if not the entire country. You're able to run the ball. You get some impact transfers from guys like Carter and Taylor on offense, right, who go out there and make some plays as well, too. Best case scenario to me, 9-3. Worst case, 4-8. Now, there might be some of you who think out there, oh, come on, guys, it can definitely get worse than 4-8. And they were 5-7 last year, and it felt like the wheels were falling off at times. And they were still able to stay in the hunt. They were still able to compete down the stretch and win some games. Another reason why I only think 4-8 for worst case scenario is, gentlemen, you get all 4 of the newcomers on the schedule, right? And we talked about this, what our experience was like. I mean, WVU was picked second in the Big 12 our first year. We ended up losing 5 straight games at one point that season. Right now, you started out 5-0 and had the top 10 ranking, and then you lost 5 straight as well, too. It's tough moving into a new conference. You're going to new stadiums for the first time. You're dealing with just all different kinds of stuff, new opponents, new coaching staffs, new stadiums, new officials, all different kinds of things. Not to mention, we all know a jump up. You know, the Big East was a power conference, but the jump up into the Big 12, right? Cincinnati's had a lot of success. BYU, Central Florida, they've had success. It's still a jump up into a bigger and better and stronger conference. So when I look at it as you replace 4 of the team, you lost 7 games last year. 4 of those 7 losses, you're not even seeing those teams again. You don't play either of the Kansas schools, Kansas or Kansas State, who you both lost to. You don't play Texas, who you lost to. You don't play Iowa State, who you lost to. You replace those with the 4 schools that enter the conference. I think worst case scenario against the 4 newcomers, you should be able to go 2-2. I don't think Houston's going to be very good. I don't think Cincinnati's going to be very good. I think UCF is a little overrated. I think they'll be the best of the 4, but a little overrated. You should be able to win 2 of those 4 games. You beat Duquesne, that's 3. You can't tell me you're not going to at least knock off one of Pitt, Tech, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State. I mean, you got to get one of those 6 games all of a sudden to win 4. So to me, worst case scenario, 4-8. I don't see this doom and gloom like, Duquesne might be the only win like some people. I think there are still, even if things go south, I don't think it's a 1 or 2 win season. So best case scenario, 9-3. Worst case scenario, 4-8.
Boy, I hate when we agree because that's kind of boring, right? But I'm going to start with worst case scenario. And I was thinking the same thing you were thinking, Wes. We get all 4 newbies. We draw all 4 newbies.
That's big. That's big.
Defensively, we expect a learning curve. And the benefit is when you look at the schedule, not only are we not getting a number of those teams that beat us last year, but we're not getting most of the premier offenses in the league. We're not getting Kansas. We're not getting Texas. We're not getting K-State. So if there's a learning curve defensively, at least you have that benefit working for you. But 4-8, I think you find a way to knock off a couple of the newbies and steal 1 or 2 outside of that. But a lot of this might turn on you got a chance to rebound irrespective of what plays out in Happy Valley. We'll get into this in crazy detail next week. But as a 3 touchdown dog, I mean, you just don't want to get physically beat up. and lose some key guys. You don't want that to happen in a game like that. You want to compete and give yourself a chance to win, and by and large stay healthy, right? So you come out of that against Duquesne. So even if you play well and have a hangover, you're facing a Duquesne slow start with your hangover. So good enough. I'm glad that's sitting there at week 2.
Yeah.
And now you come out against Pitt. Again, Pitt is going to be getting some votes. I don't know if they'll quite be ranked coming into town, but they're not a bad football team. I think they're probably better than they were last year. I think Pitt is probably better than they were last year. As a complete football team.
Even with what 5 or 6 draft picks lost, that's a lot to replace.
That's right. It is. I think their quarterback play was incredibly subpar. I think it at least will be serviceable with a kid that's played in that system before, without getting too detailed about Pitt. But I just think
we'll talk about them in a couple
they
weeks,
might be a
right?
tick better than they were last year. When we should have beat them, we all feel. But we didn't finish the job. So and then Texas Tech. I mean, here's the thing with Texas Tech. I'm fascinated by this. They're the first team getting votes. They're the first team outside the top 25. So technically they're number 26. All right. So with 100 and some odd votes, they play at Wyoming. Okay, to open the season, quirky kind of opener up in the mountains. That's a little dangerous and weird. You might catch them looking ahead. I expect them to win, but maybe not pristine and for the time capsule at Wyoming. But they'll come home the next week. They might be looking ahead to that week 2 matchup against Oregon. Oregon's a top 15 team. Now they get Oregon under the lights in Lubbock. Guys, been there, done that in Lubbock. It can get crazy. Now, if they knock off Oregon and that they're 2-0, they're top 20, not just top 25. They're top 20,
right.
top 15. Right. So they come to Morgantown. You're going to have your hands full. Now, the only struggle they had as a team last year was they weren't a good road team. They were 1-4 on the road, so we got that going for us. But you're going to have your hands full there. TCU, I just don't like the prospects of wondering what Sonny Dykes year 2 is going to look like, because year 1 was a heck of a lot better than most of us thought, right? So I'm not selling that guy short. What I'm getting into is there's not a lot of empty chairs down the schedule. Even Houston, it's not like we're playing Houston on a sleepy 11 a.m. kickoff on a Saturday.
Right.
We're taking whatever their best shot is, we're taking it primetime Thursday night. So that's challenging. Oklahoma State, they're coming to Morgantown. Guys, we haven't beat Oklahoma State in Morgantown since the Bumblebee game with Clint Trickett, the giant upset in 2013, the Gold Rush. So no giving there. I mean, you just walk your way through the schedule. I just do think we'll find a way to, worst case scenario, let's say we miss on most of those transfers on the back end defensively. Things are a little bit more disjointed than we expect for whatever reason up front, and the running game, his own touchdowns not clicking. We're not as settled at the quarterback position as we hope to be, and that leads to more turnovers, and the defense is still turnover starved. All these things could set up for disaster if they all work against you. So worst case scenario, I do think you're looking at a 4-8 style season. I don't think it's the catastrophic 1-11 type thing that, as you mentioned, some people have maybe alluded to if you're looking at the absolute worst. But when you get to the best, I'll start with this. If you get to the best, I do think it's 9-3. And part of me even thinks, look, if you go up there and steal one for the ages against Penn State, I go back to what I just said. You might exceed that, but there's just, this isn't, the last time we won 10 games in a season was 2016. Now, what people lose sight of, in 2016, Kansas was a joke. They were a layup. So you showed up and beat Kansas by 3 touchdowns playing your worst football all year. Iowa State with Paul Rhodes was a joke. They were a layup. So you had 2 automatic wins built into your conference schedule that are no longer there. So that's what it took for us in 2016 to get to 10 wins, right? That's not there. There are no empty chairs here. So it's not even a matter of, let's say you start out hot, like you said, dream scenario, you're 3-0. I mean, looking at the rest of the schedule, let's say you're 3-0 and you look at the remaining 9 games, and I give you 1 game to pick. Hey, if you're guaranteed to win in 1 other game, what's it going to be? It's going to be Tech. See what I'm saying? I mean, yeah. I'm not real comfortable with the 8 games you didn't pick. I mean, there's so many, you don't know when they're going to bring their best effort. There's so much parity in this league that from the bottom up, the bottom's not that, they're not bottom feeders, right? Yeah. I mean, there's such parity. It's so competitive with one another. Like, even when you finish 5-7, you're 5-7 instead of 7-5 because you lost a couple heartbreakers and you won a couple heartbreakers, right? So that's kind of the nature of this league, and it's continuing to be the nature of this league when you're bringing these teams in. But I mean, to exceed 9. And now, first, let's consider what it might take to get to that. The O-line clicks as we expect. The depth and versatility of the running back is everything we thought and more. Okay, on the offensive side, we find an answer at quarterback, whether that's 1 and 1A or just 1 and 2. Okay, and I think we're going to get to that very quickly. Okay, behind center, I think people are going to be pleased with what they see here in the first month of the season. We'll see, but stay tuned. So if you can do that, I think we brought in enough weapons, whether it be youth or transfers on the perimeter. All those guys are having different roles and flashing different things in camp. That I mean, one of the things I told Devin Carter at the scrimmage Saturday night, I said, Devin, I said, I saw an interview with Kalen King last week, and he was asked, like, they're a week into camp, 2 weeks into camp, just getting settled into real football. And hey, what are you most looking forward to this year? Right away. He jumped to October against Marvin Harrison. I said, no, I just wanted to kind of plant that seed. And, Devin Carter, when I see your smile, you see where I'm going with that. And Devin's like, isn't that interesting? I'm really glad you told me that. I said, yeah, spread the word, So, but anyway, I'm content with what I've seen in camp on the perimeter. The tight end room brings some interesting possibilities. Now, if you jump onto the defensive side, again, here's what good looks like. If we're going best case scenario, we hit on those transfers on the back end. They do provide answers we didn't have a year ago. We have some depth on the defensive line. We do dictate the terms on these early downs that we need to, as we talked about in the preview. If you can dictate the terms and sub at your leisure and not have the subs dictated to you by the other offense, we got some bodies that can do some different things. So best case scenario, that's what it looks like. You're getting the best out of Lee Koba. On the downs you want and getting them off the field on the downs you don't. That's what good looks like. Special teams works out. Who knows? We might even have a hidden gem in the return game. All of a sudden, you got a kickoff specialist that can put it in the end zone as consistently as some of these other Big 12 guys can. Ollie Straw takes the next step and plays just as he did throughout the lion's share last year. Dead-Eye Dick, he's penny inside the 20 every time you turn around. So all those things go your way. You can find a way to battle your way in an incredibly competitive league to 9 wins. I don't know if I can talk myself into 10 best case scenario because of the parity, even with a Penn State win. You talked about it, Wes. By any reasonable measure, it's one of the toughest schedules in college football. There are no layups. And recently, Skylar and I went back and tracked all the 10-win seasons in history, okay? By and large, they took advantage of hollow schedules that didn't have a lot of ranked teams on them. The exceptions were the teams that Owen played on. Like in 2007, we were 4-1 against ranked teams. In 2016, we were 0-1 against ranked teams and won 10 games. We don't have that kind of schedule. So you're going to have to knock off some of these heavy dogs to climb your way to 8-9 wins. That's not going to be easy. You have to answer all these questions. And it's after you're 5-7, you got a long list of questions. That's fair. Right. So worst case, yeah. I mean, I see us, dropping to that 4-8 range, but I think we find a way to pull out at least that many. But best case, that's kind of what we're looking at. And not only that, but with so much youth in the backfield, whoever the quarterback, is making the plays for us, even if it's both of them, both those guys have the potential to be back next year. Now, I would imagine at least one of them is. All right. So you're building towards something. I mean, that's what made Owen's team so special. It started when they were young, I mean, you're going to have to retool some things up front, obviously, but for a reason. I mean, you got 3 NFL offensive linemen on that unit. But Owen, what was so intriguing and impressive about the teams you played on, you won the Sugar Bowl with all those freshmen in the lineup and sophomores and guys that were back, and that bared out by winning 11 games the next 2 years. So there's some kids that play critical roles or will need to play some critical roles. I mean, I'm telling you guys, the wideouts we got in camp, both those freshmen are doing things. So interesting things going on with this youth. So that's kind of my best and kind of my worst.
Yeah, for things to happen, I mean, people are gonna have to step up. That's just how it goes. You know what I mean? For us to have the season that we're looking to have. And I think the biggest thing too, as far as motivation for us, is number 14. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If that's the motto
Absolutely.
for this season and that's what drives us, we shouldn't have a problem with any motivating tool for the whole season. But boys, I'm out of here. I'm off to Greenbrier West.
Go get him, Big O. Go coach him up. Go coach him up. That'll yeah, that's right. 8-2, baby. They ain't picking Greenbrier West to finish 14th. That's for dang sure.
Let me close with one question. If there's one thing to have that type of season that we talked about, if you reduce it down to one, what do you think, whether it's, forcing a bevy of turnovers that we haven't had in several years, or whether it's getting settled behind center, or the O-line is what we think, or what do you think the one most critical piece is?
It's funny. I think you just touched. Listen, we've talked a lot about the X factors at quarterback and how good the offensive line could be, and if you hit on those transfer guys on defense there as well too. I think turnovers is a big one, though. I meant to say that, it's funny. You and I were looking for that Twitter poll of whatever outlet asked the Pitt Penn State would you rather question. I saw some research as well too from one of the college football outlets. I don't remember if it was Pro Football Focus or somebody. And you could correct me on this if I'm wrong. I wish I could find it right now. But over the last 4 years, WVU's turnover margin was either, I'm trying to remember, but it was either dead last or next to last in the Big 12.
Yeah.
So, man, when you're, and I think like over the last 4 years, WVU was something like minus 19 in the turnover margin.
Minus 8 last year. Phil Steele has a stat, Wes, and you're hitting on it here. It's something in the ballpark of, if last year you were double-digit turnovers against you, 70% of the time you win more games the following year. We're at minus 8. We're not quite minus 10 double digits. And for the same token, if you're double digit plus in the turnover margin, I think it works against you. You win fewer games. So yeah, the ball doesn't always bounce that way. And eventually it bounces back your way.
Right. And so to me, if you can flip that script, if all of a sudden you're the ones that are stealing, almost a possession every single game, I think that's huge. When we saw that last year in a lot of the games where WVU had success, right, that was a big, think about the Baylor game, right? When you're able twice when they get into the red zone to force turnovers, you block an extra point, all these different things. The quarterback play, the offensive line, hitting on those guys on defense. That's really kind of when you do the 30,000-foot view, you got to win the turnover battle, and you got to start moving those starting field position like you and I talked about on a few episodes ago. You've got to improve on those things. Now, when that tends to happen, right, is when you've got a solid quarterback, when you've got an offensive line that's not giving up a lot of sacks and is protecting those guys, right? When you've got a successful run game that's taking care of the football, when you hit on those guys in the transfer portal that are ball hawking on the back end for you. So all these kind of things work in conjunction. But that one, like I said, I saw that number the other week, and that was kind of startling to me that we are, at the bottom of the conference over the last 4 seasons in terms of your turnover margin. If you can get that moving, if you're not minus 7, minus 8 every single year, if all of a sudden you're plus 7, plus 8, plus 9, plus 10, I think that would mean that a lot of those other things we've discussed are moving in the right direction.
I'm going to be a homer. Obviously, old quarterback, old coordinator, old quarterback coach. I don't see a path that we get to that type of season that we talked about in the best case.
No, you're right.
In today's game, it's too hard to do that with a game manager behind center. You need a difference maker at some level. So it's not enough to stay out of your own way. Okay. At some point, because so many other problems go away if you find a difference maker developing behind center. And
especially in this conference too.
Well, the modern rules just skew so heavily.
You're not Iowa and Illinois playing a 10-7 football game in this conference.
You're putting the football in the air. If you're not doing it, you can still win, but you're taking the long way around to win, the hard way to win. So if you find that kind of play develop behind center, all the things we hope unfold will more easily and readily unfold. The run game comes into play. Just imagine what your red zone touchdown production now looks like if you have that type of play at quarterback with what we know we have at the O-line, with what we hope we have at running back. So now all of a sudden you go from 31 points a game, you're in the high 30s. You're among the top third of the league if you have that with all the other pieces. And talk about stealing a possession a game, where you're stealing a touchdown a game if you can do those things. But I just don't see a path for us to get to 8-9 wins, best case scenario, without the quarterbacks developing into
being a
different
strength.
makers as opposed to game managers. There's times to be game managers, but you're going to have to win some shootouts.
I completely agree with you on that. I think that's well said. Thank you to Toothman Ford, of course, for presenting this episode of ITG as well. Our guys down there in Grafton. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Make sure you're showing some love to Toothman Ford, as they do so much for all of our athletes and NIL at WVU. And of course, to Fortis as well, too, for roof performance and financial security guaranteed. Make sure you visit fortis.us.com. This was a fun episode. Good idea for this week, Jed. You and Skylar have been pumping out great previews and look backs and 10-win seasons and records against top 25 opponents. It's been a lot of fun. And folks, we're just getting it going for you. Next week, obviously, don't look now, but it's here. It's game week next week. So we will have episodes for you about 4 or 5 next week. Phil Steele is going to help preview with us. We'll do our normal previews that you expect as well, too, as we get ready for that opening game. Again, now just 11 days away or so out there at Beaver Stadium, 110,000 people at Happy Valley. Have you ever been to a game there before, Jed, real quick?
I have not. I found myself in a rabbit hole. It's like last night, Wes, and these are what happens is I have a to-do list over the course of a summer when you open a game like this. And on my to-do list was I was hell-bent on going back to watch the 2013 Texas at BYU game, which was Manny Diaz's, who's the coordinator at Penn State. It was his final game at Texas. He was fired the next morning when BYU ran for 550 yards on Texas. Ooh. So I'm terribly curious. So I went back early in the summer and rewatched that. Well, last night I was truly in the rabbit hole because I was sitting there taking notes, watching it, diagram, like, all right, I still see these even front contact. What's different? What's the same as to what he did then when he got gashed? But I'm that far in on Penn State. I started in the summer, but now I'm truly in the rabbit hole. So and I was just talking to somebody about this today. I haven't been to a game there, and I've been through there, but not to a game. And there's always an incredibly cool novelty. You know this from traveling with the Steelers, to visiting a facility for the first time.
Yep.
As cool as DKR in Austin and all the venues in the Big 12. I've been there 5-6 times. The novelty's worn off, and now it's just showing up for work, right? Like the back of your hand, like Mountaineer Field, but that's not the case. So I'm very much looking forward to being on press row, understanding the good and the bad. I mean, I'm already hearing complaints about the press box, all right? The spacing,
oh, buddy,
box, So
the stadium. So I've been there 3 times. Twice when they played Ohio State, and once for a spring game. Okay. So my family is split. My dad was a Euler, obviously, my last name. My mom was a Kaufman. My mom's whole side of the family is from Doddridge County, West Virginia. My dad's whole side of the family is from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is not far from State College. So my family is split. It's half Penn State fans, half WVU fans. So there's been some times where we've had family things and this and that out there. And don't worry, I've never worn Penn State stuff when I go to those games, as I've never worn collegiate apparel of any school other than WVU in my life. And I'm 32 years old. That's a true story.
I can send you some Glenville State stuff. And then
I would rock some Glenville State stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I did have a Robert Morris business department t-shirt in high school that I used to do landscaping work in, but it was the RMU business school, so it doesn't count as as athletic apparel. That's the only one. It is an incredible atmosphere, but it is also a dump, if that makes sense. Like, have
you been in the press? I'm hearing seriously.
I have not, but it's one of those stadiums that they built it, and then they pieced together, and then they pieced together, and then they pieced together.
It's House of the Seven Gables. Yeah,
it's like, Jed, I don't know if you remember. Like, did you ever go to the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, the Penguins' old arena?
No.
Like, that place, it gives me the same vibes. Like, the Civic Arena was a dump, but it was my dump. You know what I mean? Like,
what you're describing was?
You would go.
When I was in law school, I used to go to Tiger Stadium all the time, long before America. And Tiger Stadium, I swear the press box was like our deer stand. I mean, it was just. But we're not even traveling. Like, we're keeping folks on the crew back in Morgantown. I thought it's local. Everybody will be. One of the cool things about being so close is the whole crew. No, there's not enough room in the press box.
Yep.
So it's only going to be a fraction of us with our engineer and the on-air team. But I'm looking forward to kind of feeling my way down. You know how it is, the corridor, the locker room.
No, it's a hallowed ground, but it's one of those, like, there's and I got to be careful. I don't want to say too many nice things about Penn. Well, I did just call their stadium a dump, but it's one of those that, like, I love it, and I mean that as a compliment almost in a way, because it's the same thing as going to an old school stadium before it was all corporate seats and suites and all those things, right? Like, the people that are there to watch football. You know, like you go to Pitt games, you go to Steelers games, whatever. Like, a lot of those people there are corporate people who pay a lot of money, and it's in a tailgating event, and they're into it, but they're not diehard about it. They don't.
It's a social event, not a football game.
The people who drive and wait in traffic for 37 hours in a cow pasture in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, they're there for football. So it's a unique atmosphere. But if you need to go to the bathroom, plan to give yourself at least 20, 30 minutes, because it's
one of the first things. Hey, and to this day,
a dump. It's a dump.
You want to know the most sideline reporter friendly bathroom from an access stand, other than Mountaineer Field, because the Mountaineer Field on field bathroom,
right? They've got them in the tunnel.
I usually go in the locker room, and because when you go into the on field bathroom at Mountaineer Field, I mean, you're standing there waiting behind. I'm trying to think of different. Let me think here. Pistol Pete, he's in front of you, right? With his headgear on. Yeah, that's who you see in the bathroom.
You can't get out of character.
So, so that's what you're dealing with. But Syracuse, the Carrier Dome, it was right behind the end zone. It was perfect. It was 30 feet away. But I mean, I normally scout. I'm not a rookie. I usually scout those things out early and often. But I'm kind of intrigued about what I'm going to like about it, and more importantly, what I'm not going to like about it.
I'll be interested to get your debrief in 2 weeks,
and I'll tell you how accurate it is or isn't. I'm envisioning a supersized Georgia Southern in Statesboro, Georgia.
Okay,
because I've coached there, I've played there. It's out in the farm. It's an FCS now. It's Division I, but it's a decent sized stadium. I'm expecting that on steroids times 5 in that kind of setting, and I'll see. I've been by it and saw it in the distance. You know what I mean, in Happy Valley, but not really
right.
Check it out and appreciate it. But
they've dressed it up nicely on the outside, but once you get in there, it's like exposed ceilings, and it's like shaking, and it's rusty, and the bathrooms are like, I'm pretty sure that they were used during the Civil War, those bathrooms, to house people. I mean, they're just it's unique. It's unique.
I've told you on this show before, and we'll close with this. We got to roll out of here. But the standard bearer for horrible visitors facilities, to me in the Big 12, is Texas Tech, and I stick to it. The visitors' locker room at Texas Tech in Lubbock at Jones AT&T Stadium, I use this analogy all the time because I feel it's on point and accurate. You feel like you're in an 1850s Mexican prison, something you'd see like out of a Southwestern territory. With some old
John Wayne movie.
Yeah, and a spaghetti Western. It's terrible. It's terrible. So now if they don't at least rise up to that, in a weird way, I'll kind of be impressed. But
there you go. Well, we'll get the full debrief from Jed in 2 weeks. Next week, obviously, we'll have all of our previews to get you ready. Phil Steele for the first time here on ITG. We're looking forward to a bunch of great stuff for you guys this season, and it all gets going next week. The last thing we ask of you, as always, is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Reminder about our 2 different podcast feeds, right? Make sure you're subscribing to the Believe feed, the one that has Owen Hurtling, Devin McCourty from Rutgers. That poor soul. I heard he did all right for himself in his NFL and his professional career. So maybe he's not a poor soul.
I'm glad you said that. Last week when Skylar posted one, hey, it's not on Spotify yet. Well, we rectified that, but there'll be a time in the near future it won't be. So
make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you're subscribing to the right podcast feed for In the Gun, the one that has Owen Hurtling Rutgers, not the one that has our logo. Again, we're grandfathering this in. They'll still be populated for a while, but not forever. Make sure you're subscribing to the right feed there, the one that we continue to post on our social media accounts now. But of course, as always, on YouTube as well, In the Gun podcast, where everything's there. You get the visual element of all the graphics that Jed does and that Skylar puts together for us. So we're ready to get rocking and rolling here on a new season. Thanks to Skylar for producing this, as always, for us. Thanks again to BetOnline, Toothman Ford, and Fortis for presenting this episode of ITG as well. For the beer truck, Owen Schmidt, and the signal caller, Wesley Euler, And the signal caller, Wesley Euler. I'm jumping the gun here. Let's try that again. Rewind. For the beer truck, Owen Schmidt, and the signal caller, Jed Drenning. I am Wesley Euler, and you've been in the gun.